I came home after my husband's funeral to find my ML sitting on my couch, smiling. We've decided you'll move out. We'll handle his estate from here. She tossed me a small bag. Take what you can carry. I laughed, pulled out my husband's will, and said, then you'll be happy to hear what he left you. Her smile vanished instantly. I lost my husband, Daniel, after a brutal battle with cancer. It had been months of exhaustion, of watching the strongest person I knew wither away, of hospital trips, late-night sobbing, and the kind of grief that clings to your bones. Through all of it, my mother-in-law, Margaret, was less than supportive. Margaret never liked me. She saw me as some gold-digging outsider who stole her son away, even though Daniel and I had been together for 10 years, married for 5, and I had been his primary caretaker while she barely showed up. The funeral was the final insult. She acted like she was the grieving widow, sobbing louder than anyone, throwing herself over the casket, and whispering about how she should have protected him better. The woman was a show, I tell you. And through it all, she never once looked at me, the actual widow. So imagine my shock when I came home after the service, exhausted, emotionally drained, only to find Margaret and her delightful daughter, my sister-in-law Denise, sitting in my living room like they owned the place. Margaret smiled at me like a cat that just caught a mouse. We've decided you'll move out, she said, crossing her legs. We'll handle his estate from here. Denise, smirking like the brat she was, tossed a tiny duffel bag at my feet. Take what you can carry. I just stared at them. Was I hallucinating? Maybe the grief had finally broken my brain, and I was imagining this absurdity. Then Margaret added, Daniel wouldn't want you in his house without him. Oh, okay. I took a slow, deep breath, reached into my purse, and pulled out Daniel's will. The will that he had finalized when he first got sick. The will that, after months of back and forth, he had not shared with his mother. I dropped it on the coffee table between us. Then you'll be happy to hear what he left you, I said, voice steady. Margaret's smile twitched. Denise's smirk disappeared. I flipped to the page I had practically memorized. Daniel left everything to me. The house, the cars, the savings, even his business shares. Everything. You know what he left you, Margaret? I tapped the paper. A handwritten letter and his old watch. She snatched the will up like she could change the words just by glaring at them. That's not possible, she snapped. Oh, but it is, I said, shrugging. And it's legally binding. Denise, who had clearly expected some kind of payout, turned red. You made him do this, she hissed. I laughed. I actually laughed. Daniel did this because of you. Because he knew you'd try to pull something exactly like this. Margaret, now looking like a cornered animal, stood up abruptly. You can't prove that, she snapped. I don't have to. I picked up my phone. But if you want, we can call my lawyer. Right now. That was when they really started panicking. Margaret went straight for manipulation. But, sweetie, we're family. No, Margaret, I interrupted, my voice ice. Daniel was my family. You lost that right a long time ago. She opened her mouth again, but I held up a hand. You have 10 minutes to leave my house before I call the police and have you trespassed. Margaret looked like she had bitten into a lemon. Denise just gawked at me. And then? Then, like magic, they scurried out. And that was just the beginning. The lawsuit for about a week, things were quiet. Too quiet. Margaret and Denise had scurried off like rats, but I knew better than to think they'd stay gone. Sure enough, I got a letter in the mail, a lawsuit. Margaret was contesting the will. Her claim? That Daniel had been mentally unfit when he wrote it and that I had unduly influenced him. She wanted everything split, fairly, between her, Denise, and me. I was furious. Daniel had been of sound mind until the very end. He had been careful, deliberate. He had written that will to protect me, and now his mother was trying to undo everything he had wanted. I called my lawyer immediately. Let them try, he said, calm as ever. They don't have a case. We have medical records proving Daniel was mentally competent. We have witness statements. We have video recordings of him discussing his will. That's right. Daniel, the brilliant man he was, had recorded himself explaining why he made the decisions he did, just in case his mother tried something. So, I filed my response and prepared for battle. And then, as if the lawsuit wasn't enough, Margaret started really playing dirty. The break-in one night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a noise downstairs. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The house was supposed to be empty. I lived alone now. I grabbed my phone, creeping out of bed. When I peeked down the stairs, I saw the front door was open. The night breeze moved the curtains. And then, I saw a shadow move in the kitchen. Adrenaline hit me so fast I felt sick. My first instinct? Call the police. But I also grabbed the baseball bat Daniel used to keep by the door. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't about to sit there and wait to be robbed, or worse. I stepped toward the kitchen as quietly as possible, bat raised. Then, a crash. I flipped on the lights, and who do I see? Denise, rummaging through my cabinets. We locked eyes. For a split second, she looked as shocked as I was. Then she had the audacity to sneer. You changed the locks. No shit, I changed the locks. What the hell are you doing in my house? I snapped, keeping a tight grip on the bat. She crossed her arms like she was the one who had been wronged. I was looking for something of my brother's. Something you stole. You mean the things he left me? I corrected. She huffed. You don't deserve any of it. I could feel my blood boiling. And you thought breaking in was the solution? Denise rolled her eyes like I was the unreasonable one. This is my family's house. No, Denise. I pulled out my phone. It's my house. And now you're going to jail. She laughed. You wouldn't dare. I dialed 911. Her smile vanished. Suddenly, she was begging. Wait. Don't call the cops. Please. I just wanted something of his. Then you should have asked, I snapped. She lunged for me. Whether to grab my phone or the bat, I don't know. But my survival instincts kicked in, and I swung. The bat connected with her shoulder, hard enough to make her stumble back. She shrieked, clutching herself. You crazy bitch, she screamed. The dispatcher answered. I have a trespasser in my home, I said, breathing hard. I need the police. Now. Denise panicked. She bolted for the door, clutching her shoulder. She ran. But guess what? I had security cameras. The cops arrived within minutes. I showed them the footage. Denise was arrested for breaking and entering. Margaret bailed her out the next morning. And instead of backing down, they doubled down. The fake witness a few days later, my lawyer called me. You're not gonna believe this, he said, amusement in his voice. Oh, at this point? Try me. They submitted a new witness statement. From Daniel. I nearly dropped my coffee. What? They claimed Daniel recorded a separate video saying he was forced to sign the will under duress. And they just found it on his old laptop. I had to laugh. They were getting sloppy. Tell me you're about to rip them apart. Oh, absolutely. Turns out, the video was doctored. My lawyer's tech expert proved it was pieced together from old recordings of Daniel. The judge was not amused. The lawsuit? Thrown out. Denise? Now facing felony charges for breaking into my house. Margaret? Still trying to play the victim. And me? I was just getting started. A week after the lawsuit was thrown out, I started getting audits on Daniel's estate. Not just standard probate stuff, IRS-level audits. Now, I've always been careful with paperwork, and Daniel was meticulous about keeping things clean. So when I got a notice that the IRS was investigating possible fraud on his assets, I knew something was off. My lawyer confirmed it. Someone sent an anonymous tip. And let's be honest, who else could it be? I wasn't about to sit around and let Margaret and Denise screw with my life any more than they already had. So I did something they never saw coming. I hired a private investigator. And boy, did that open up a can of worms. The secret debt you see, while they were busy trying to scam me out of the house, they forgot one tiny, little thing. They were both drowning in debt. Margaret had taken out loans using Daniel's name before he died. Denise had forged his signature on several credit applications. Oh, and the cherry on top? They had been embezzling money from Daniel's business. Yeah, they weren't just greedy. They were criminals. When my PI handed me the full report, I nearly choked on my coffee. Not only had they been stealing, but they had also been horrible at covering their tracks. Fake invoices, shady wire transfers, and an actual paper trail that led straight to their accounts. I sent everything to my lawyer. His response? Oh, this is going to be fun. The bank account's frozen within a week. My lawyer filed fraud charges on behalf of Daniel's business. Margaret and Denise had their bank accounts frozen. Denise? Lost her job when word got out that she had been stealing. Margaret? Oh, she lost her damn mind. She came banging on my door at 7 a.m., screaming like a banshee. You did this, she shrieked. I sipped my coffee and stared at her through the peephole. You ruined us, she kept yelling, pounding on the door like a lunatic. I let her scream. Then, in the pettiest move of my life, I opened the door just enough to slip out a copy of the fraud report, the one with her name all over it. Margaret snatched it up, read the first page, and went dead silent. Then, she burst into tears. Oh, now she wanted sympathy? I tilted my head. You wanted to take everything from me. I just returned the favor. She turned bright red and tried to push past me into the house. But guess what? I had already called the cops. The moment she stepped forward, the sirens blared down the street. Margaret's face? Priceless. She was arrested on the spot for harassment and trespassing. And Denise? Well, she had bigger problems. The jailhouse snitch while Margaret was busy losing her mind. Denise was sitting in jail, facing felony charges for breaking into my house. And guess what? She tried to cut a deal. She snitched on her own mother to avoid jail time. She confessed that Margaret had forged Daniel's name on documents, stolen money, and, get this, hired someone to falsify the will dispute. Margaret was now facing serious fraud charges. Denise? She got a plea deal, but she lost everything. Margaret? She was going to prison. And me? I was finally free. Or so I thought. Because just when I believed it was over, I found out something that made my stomach drop. Daniel had left me one last letter. And inside? A secret he had never told anyone. Want to know what was in that letter? Because trust me, it changed everything. The final secret, the letter was tucked inside an old book on Daniel's bedside table. I don't know why I decided to flip through it that night. Maybe I was looking for some kind of closure. Maybe I just missed him. But when I opened the worn pages, a folded envelope slipped out. My hands shook as I read the front. For my love, if she ever needs the truth. I sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse pounding. I almost didn't want to open it. But I did. And what I read made my entire world stop. She killed my father. Daniel's letter wasn't long, but every word sliced through me like a blade. He wrote about his father's death. How Margaret had always told him it was a heart attack. How, years later, he had discovered the truth. She had withheld his medication. Intentionally. Daniel never confronted her directly, but he had proof, medical records, missing prescriptions, and a letter from his father's old doctor who had suspected something but never had enough to take action. And the worst part? Daniel wrote, I think she did it for money. She had cashed out his father's life insurance days after the funeral. My hands were cold. My body felt like it wasn't even mine anymore. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about stealing money. Margaret was a murderer. The confrontation, I didn't sleep that night. I barely moved. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Margaret's lawyer and offered to meet in person. I told him I was willing to talk about a deal. He jumped at it. So, that afternoon, I walked into a sleek office where Margaret was already seated, smug as ever. Denise wasn't there. She had been smart enough to disappear. Margaret smiled as I sat across from her. I knew you'd come around, she said, like she had already won. You were never cut out for this fight. I placed Daniel's letter on the table. Her smile flickered. She glanced at it, then back at me. What is this? The truth. I sat back and watched her read. The room was silent. Then, for the first time ever, I saw fear in her eyes. She swallowed hard, forcing a smile. This is ridiculous. A desperate lie from a dying man. I pulled out my phone and hit play. A recording of Daniel's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, it means she finally went too far. My mother killed my father, and I have the proof. I don't know what she's capable of anymore. But if she tries to hurt my wife, if she tries to take what's mine, then you'll know I was right. Margaret froze. Then? She snapped. She lunged across the table, trying to grab the phone out of my hands. But she wasn't fast enough. The door burst open. 2 police officers stepped inside. Margaret screamed. No, you can't do this. They pulled her away, reading her rights as she thrashed like a wild animal. And then, just as they dragged her past me, she turned and spat out the truth. I did it. And I'd do it again. That man deserved to die. The entire room went still. I saw it hit her, the realization that she had just confessed. The officers shoved her forward, out of the room, her voice fading down the hall. And just like that, she was done. Margaret was formally charged with murder. Her past financial records proved she had profited off her husband's death. The medical records? Only made it worse. She tried to retract her confession, but it was too late. She went to trial. And she lost. She was sentenced to life in prison. Denise? She ran. She vanished. I don't know where she is, and I don't care. And me? I sat in an empty house for weeks, feeling everything and nothing all at once. I had won, but I had lost so much. One day, I finally opened the last box of Daniel's things. And inside, I found another note. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. I hope you never need to use this. But if you do, I know you'll be strong enough to do what's right. I love you. Forever. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried. For him. For everything we had lost. For the justice that had finally come. I don't know what happens next. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe again.